Talking Nerdcore, Talking Nerdcore today. We're talking Nerdcore, Talking Nerdcore our way. We're talking Nerdcore, Talking Nerdcore today. We're talking Nerdcore, Talking Nerdcore our way.
Hey guys, how's it going? It's the Overanalyst here, and welcome to episode 15 of Talking Nerdcore. Can't believe we've actually gone 15 episodes here. Tonight's guest is Rhyce Records, who was on my very first episode. Hey Rhyce, you want to reintroduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, sure can. So Rhyce Records, as AO introduced me, I am a nerdcore artist / musician / producer, mixer, and I do some AMV work as well, and thumbnails, if you guys need anything.
Cool. Yeah, I've been doing my own thumbnails, and I swear, every time I think I'm improving, I'm not even sure if I'm improving or not.
No, you're doing good. I think the thumbnails are getting better. What do you use to make them?
I'm actually use my video editor, Vegas Pro.
Okay, gotcha. Very cool. I use Canva for some, and I use Pixlr for others. It's like just a free online service.
Okay, I might take a look into that. If I needed like transparent stuff, I usually just use the default Windows Paint, and I can actually get transparent images from that.
Oh, nice. Very cool.
Yeah. Anyways, this episode, we're talking about Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. And you told me this is one of the animes you're most passionate about. So do you want to kind of describe it a little bit and your kind of feelings towards it?
Yeah, I guess. It's kind of hard to describe, right? Like, I think that's one of the things I like about it. And if you've seen the original, which I know you haven't, but for your audience, if you've seen the original, you know how off the walls the original gets, because at a certain point they run out of manga and then they take their own story, right? Pretty common. But Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood is the full-on manga adaptation, true to the comic anime that is really about sort of a fantastical world, you know, mixed in between fantasy and sci-fi, I would say, right? There's definitely some steampunk elements, and definitely takes influence from a lot of that. But the main through line is alchemy exists in this world, which is essentially equivalent exchange, right? It looks like magic to us, but to them it's really science, right? Where you take something and you exchange it for something else. It's so it's sort of the fantastical play on alchemy, which was a real thing that people used a long time ago, and you know, sort of peddled, as it were, right, where you could turn lead into gold and things like that. So, but the story itself follows two brothers, Ed and Al, and their sort of journey in their self-discovery and some craziness along the way. I mean, there's a lot in there without getting into too spoiler territory yet.
I was gonna say, yeah, we'll cover spoilers on the second half of this podcast.
Okay, all right. I was like, speaking of which, if you haven't seen it, you should probably shut this off.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna be talking about spoilers, but I'll gear that towards about the 30-minute mark.
Okay, sounds good. But yeah, I mean, to your second half of your question, right? Why am I passionate about it? It was one of the first anime I saw, the original at least. And really stuck with me, kind of that story, some of the life lessons from it, which aren't evident, immediately, but things like, you know, nothing equals the value of human life is a really big through line in that show, which I really, really appreciate, and that like keep moving forward aspect that the characters really embody. So, yeah.
Yeah, for me, I saw the show for the first time about 4 or 5 years ago, and I really got hooked on it about like 15 or 20 episodes in, and you probably know around that region what happens there. So my fun story about this one that I've mentioned on like how I got into anime in that podcast was that I was trying to get my mom into this show because I really thought I liked the dark undertones, and I would
Okay.
constantly play the music from the show because the show has a beautiful OST. And so I would
Mm-hmm.
constantly play it, and she loved listening to the OST all the time. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to show you the show. And I got her up to the Nina Tucker incident, and I was
Oh
like,
boy.
and I
Oh
was
boy.
like, if she doesn't get hooked on this, there's no hope for her. And she did not get hooked on it. She was
Well,
like, this
dude,
is not it
she's a
for me.
mother, man.
I
She's a
know.
mother, man. That episode, which is actually episode 4, when I was looking back at the episodes for this,
Was it really that early?
it's episode 4, and and you're like, wow, that goes south very fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and it's interesting because the Full Metal Brotherhood
Mm-hmm.
starts really strong, where it's like fast paced. They're chasing down a dude, and like you get right into
Yeah.
it, and then they sort of back up, right, and then take it easy from there. But yeah, episode 4. I mean, if you're not hooked in the show on episode 4 by the end of that, and you're like, what the did I just watch? Yeah, then it's not for you,
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah. And that I was actually going to ask you, like, what are some turning points in the show? And like for me, that was one of the biggest turning points, episode 4,
Mm-hmm.
because leading up to that, I was just thinking, oh, it's just kind of a chill. It's a little bit goofy. I mean, they just did this arc where they went up against some kind of religious fanatic, and
Yeah.
you know, they took him out, yay, and then the whole Nina Tucker incident. You're like, oh, this show's gonna get dark.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, I mean, again, it's kind of hard not to get into spoilers
Yeah.
talking turning points, right? So, FYI, spoiler. I don't know if you
Mhm.
want to throw that on the screen in your editing, but
Yeah.
what I would say is some big turning points. Nina Tucker was the first one that
Yeah.
you really experience. I'd say the second one is when they find out what the Philosopher's Stone is made out of,
Yeah.
right? Where, again, spoiler, Philosopher's Stone's made out of life
Mm-hmm.
energy, so sacrifice humans to get that power.
Yeah.
And it's not inexhaustible, which is what they thought, when they were seeking it out to recover their limbs and get their body back. And they definitely could have using this,
Mm-hmm.
and instead they chose not to because they didn't want to use human life. So that one was, again, like, oh, that's pretty dark, but like, how did that happen? Like, how does that work with alchemy?
Yeah.
And so it kind of pulls you back in. And then I really, really enjoyed the hook and the turning point with Scar a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
So when Scar gets introduced as a character, I found that pretty profound, that like all he wants to do is bring peace, but the only way not to like say Peacemaker, which is a recent DC show, is just, that's a funny show. But that by bringing more violence, it just breeds more violence, right? So like
Yeah.
he's himself part of the problem.
Yeah, definitely. For me, I think another one of the biggest turning points is what happens to Hughes. Mace Hughes.
Yeah,
That
that messed me up.
Yeah, that really messed me up. And well, I'll talk more about that in the second half of this episode.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that was definitely a powerful scene. And so as we're kind of talking in general here, what are some themes you think Full Metal Alchemist like really tackles well?
Yeah, I think, I spoke to a few of them, right? That vengeance will destroy you. You see this through the character of Roy Mustang. You see it through a little bit through Hawkeye. Honestly, you see it through as that kind of as a through line between all the characters, but like that if you let it consume you, vengeance will be your downfall.
Yeah.
Right. And so I found that pretty fascinating, and was definitely a theme through it. And I mean, there's a really funny character in the show, Armstrong.
Yes.
Who he's like incredibly powerful, the most camp, you can imagine. And I think what he represents, and they did really well, is that emotions don't make you weak.
Yeah.
right? And because he is always crying, or he's always like, showing emotion on his sleeve.
He's almost like the motherly character. Like
Yeah,
he
yeah,
wants to take care of Edward and Al.
right. And everybody, right? Like
Yeah.
his soldiers, everybody around him, he wants to be their shield and protect them. And he's quite effective at it, right? He's very strong. Like he's a strong dude.
Yeah.
And so I liked that it was, my emotions don't make me weak. They're what makes me strong, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, what about you? Any themes that stood out for you?
For me, what kind of stood out for me is religion versus science, and how you can't really. It's okay to have both. It's okay to believe in both, from kind of what I gathered, and there's this whole thing where it's like Edward is very science driven. He doesn't really believe in religion. And then you also have kind of the religious fanatics, and you have this person who claims to be God, and he doesn't believe it, and you kind of find somewhere in the middle there, which
Yeah.
I'm a very appreciative person coming from someone who is religious. I am a Christian. I'm not usually afraid to admit it, and
Sure.
so I
Well, and
really like seeing that theme where it's like
yeah.
religion doesn't have to be bad. And I feel like that's a theme that I see a lot in media, where they're constantly portraying religion as something bad. So I really like that.
No, that's super fascinating that came to the forefront for you. I definitely see myself more as a spiritual person, but I grew up Lutheran, so I grew up
Okay.
very much in the church, and it is one of those things, right, that they don't have to be mutually exclusive, right? Is you can be an intelligent person and view science for what it is, and also take it as the approach of like you can believe in evolution and also the Bible,
Yeah.
right? Again, the Bible is a set of stories, parables, teachings, and evolution may be the factual way that that's described, but that doesn't take away that maybe the fifth day was actually 1 billion years, right? Like
Yeah.
who knows, right? Like what is time to that essence? And so I love what you said there with, where it's kind of like them coming together, and in a way, alchemy is this magic, and I keep referencing it as magic because it seems that way.
Yeah, it really does.
And it's really this cool way they blend it between, it's a connection to God in a lot of ways, right? Like the way that the door appears and like the souls and like all that stuff, right, is very much like there's a bridge, and it's very hard to get across. It's not impossible. So no, yeah, that's a cool theme that you took away.
Yeah. So speaking about like the whole alchemy power system, I really like the idea of equivalent exchange. I really think that's fascinating and something kind of unique to just power systems and across media in general, where you don't get something, you usually get something big for something little cost. And here the cost isn't like inward, like mana or anything. It's literally something else. It's another material. It's got to be something. So
Yeah, I mean, as a power system, it is both limited and unlimited at the same time, right? Where if you have enough material, you have enough power, you can do X thing. Whereas you take like Lord of the Rings as a power system, it's not really a structured power system, right?
Yeah.
Like, why does Gandalf come back? I mean, there's that they try to explain it, right? But like at a certain point, it's like, well, because it's convenient, for the plot, and so on and so forth. And so no, the exchange system is really interesting, and also brings up another theme for me, which is that as human beings, we can add things versus just exchange things. So even though we've been told, you're told through the whole story, right? Like equivalent exchange.
Yeah.
There is a time where Ed, uses something, adds one little, like the human element to it, and creates something new, right? That you couldn't get just from the exchange.
Yeah, and it's kind of just the whole thought of like, what is life? You know, how do you make life? It
Yeah.
is a very fascinating process. So, ooh, I had that locked. Anyways, so kind of talking about the story, and we're introduced to a couple characters where we have Roy Mustang, who is kind of like the chief officer to the kingdom. You kind of want to describe the kingdom a little bit? Just kind of
Sure.
general overview?
It's I mean, hard to describe.
Yeah.
But it's definitely got political overtones, right? So think of it, I guess, a little bit like Germany.
That they use a lot of German names, so
There's a Führer.
Yeah.
As their leader, no direct correlation to Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
but I mean, definitely some through lines, right? Like there's evil powers, there's political, but there's also the state, right? So there's things called state alchemists in this, which you can think of as like the army or the military.
Yeah.
And Roy Mustang is one of the chief officers, and Ed and Al, the two main characters, are both also state alchemists who kind of do their own thing.
Well, they become state alchemists because that was the legal thing to do. That was the way that
they could use alchemy.
Yeah, it was which is very fascinating in itself, because if you think about it, alchemy is almost a restrictive system in that case, you know.
It's almost similar, again, through lines to like Harry Potter, right?
Yeah.
Where you can only use magic if you're an accredited, wizard or witch, and you have to go to Hogwarts. And if you use it before you're of age, then, you can get thrown into Azkaban, right? So.
Yeah. It's, I really like that whole political system, and there's other countries too that get introduced, but they're not really on the foreground. Like we've got a country that's very close to China. It's like Xinjiang, or like it's
it's definitely like they definitely have some issues with how they name stuff, right? I mean, Japan, classic. But in terms of there's like China, there's also the Middle East, as like, and I mean, again, it's Germany, it's Europe. That is the main place that it takes place. Ed is definitely blonde hair, blue eye type person, right? So like definitely takes place in Europe. But the political through line also extends to war and how war is engaged, and we get introduced to Scar, who I believe is a character from like the Middle East type country, who his family and his home was destroyed by the state alchemists and by I don't want to say Germany in this case. I can't think of the name of the country in the anime, but
I'm blanking on it too. Every time I try to think of a country name, it's like Fiora. I'm like, no, that's Fairy Tale. I always think of the Fairy Tale country. Always. I don't know why. But,
well, speaking of Fairy Tale, a song in the works with Afro. So.
Ooh, I just reacted to a couple of his Fairy Tale songs.
Nice. Yeah, no, he loves Fairy Tale. There's no denying that.
Yeah.
And we're doing a Zaref track together.
Oh, cool.
So.
Yeah, no, tomorrow I'm recording another episode with Storm's Cryomancer, and we're talking Fairy Tale, so.
Nice.
Yeah,
well, I won't steal that thunder then.
Yeah, I tried getting Afro on, but he hasn't responded to me, so.
Oh, well, there's more time yet. I'm sure you can talk for 17 hours about Fairy Tale.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, very, very fascinating there. And so, through the beginning, Edward and Alphonse, we should actually describe them a little bit. We kind of just threw them about, but we haven't actually described the main characters. So, Edward and Alfred are brothers who tried bringing their mother back from the dead. She died of illness.
To be clear, is it episode 1 or is it episode 2?
I think it is 2, or I think they hinted at it at the end of episode 1, and then it kind of bled over into episode 2.
Yeah.
But they tried, and they did something.
I mean, it didn't go great.
It didn't go great. Alphonse lost his body. And
yeah.
he would have
almost his life.
Yeah, he would have been killed, but Edward was smart enough to bind his soul to a suit of armor, which I gotta call a little bit of BS there. There just happened to be a suit of armor lying around, but plot convenience.
I mean, their dad, you know, he's got stuff lying around. He was a state alchemist.
True, but armor?
But a suit of armor, yeah. Like, I don't know why you'd have armor. Like medieval armor, too.
Yeah.
Like, very specific, heavy, full plate armor. Although it'd be funny to watch him walk around as, like, chainmail, because he'd just definitely be like a ghost.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. But, yeah, so basically, in order to bring their mother somewhat back from the dead, she kind of came back as a creepy monster thing. Alphonse lost his body, and Edward lost an arm and a leg. Literally. He literally gave up an arm and a leg.
Yeah, that was a little on the nose, wasn't it? Like, kind of making fun of that. Like, would you give an arm and a leg? Yeah, no, that's a really intense scene. And what I find really fascinating about it, too, is the way that as children, we get taught things as fact. Right. And for them, alchemy was magic, right? And like could do anything. And like they felt like, oh, we can do anything we want. And, you know, it got to the point where they were like, literally, here's all the components of the human body, right? Like we have every single thing that we need to make a human body. And that isn't the point. The point is the soul is gone, right? So like that.
And what is a soul?
Right. What is a soul in this case? And so, they were missing it, whatever it is. And it came back. It definitely not a great time. Hard to describe. Again, watch the show if you haven't.
So, yeah, basically from then on, their whole mission was to try and get Alphonse's body back. That's what he was trying to do. And they were trying to go and track down the Sorcerer's Stone because it was said that it might have the power to bring his body back.
The Philosopher's Stone.
Philosopher's Stone. You got me into Harry Potter, and I was just like, Sorcerer.
Yeah. No, you're good. No, that was their mission. And speaking of, Edward, he replaces his arm and leg with, what's it called? It's called automail?
Yeah.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah, I believe so.
That's cool. And that's like the sci-fi version.
They call it the steampunky.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really, really like it because it gave him kind of a little bit of a robotic, almost scientific feel. Because like I said earlier, he's very science-driven. Yeah. And so that whole aesthetic makes him more... Kind of, it fits with his character, I'd say.
Yeah. And it becomes part of him too, right? That he can do alchemy through the automail is an interesting aspect to him as well.
Yeah, he can change up, the shape, and so he can turn his arm into a spear.
Yeah.
He gets very creative. And I gotta say, it's rough being Alphonse. Like, later on in the show, actually, this was something that my mom brought up when she was first watching. She was like, man, I would love to be Alphonse. You don't need to eat or sleep or any of that. You don't have to. And literally, that's what Alphonse started complaining about halfway through the show. He's like, I don't sleep ever. I can't taste food. I can't enjoy things.
Yeah, I mean, and when it gets down to the nitty gritty, he never gets older either. Yeah. Mentally, he gets older because he's learning and growing, right? Like, and all that good stuff. But, even his voice is still that of a child, right? And so he never quite gets out of that. So, no, I feel for Alphonse a lot in the show, particularly because there does come a time where he feels like he needs to take care of Ed. And Ed has always had this sort of small dude complex, right? Mm-hmm. Where he always feels the need to overcompensate, and he always feels the need to protect his brother, and it's even they hint at it every time that somebody introduces him. It's like, oh, this is my little brother, Alphonse, and they're like, what do you mean? That's
Yeah.
definitely your big brother, yeah.
Yeah, and what you can't tell by the voice? They kind of,
Yeah, right. Well, and depending on if you watch the sub or the dub, the Ed's voice is very high.
yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah,
anyways,
I think I actually watched it dubbed because I just liked the voice acting.
the voice acting for Full Metal. So if you're on the fence and you're like, I don't know if I want to watch sub dub, I agree. Like I think the dub for Full Metal is actually really top notch voice acting.
Yeah.
Like I think they do a really good job.
Okay.
And there's some shows where I know this is sacrilege, but there's some shows where I actually prefer the dub to the sub because of the voice acting.
Really?
Yeah, like Dragon Ball Z, can't stand the Japanese voice acting.
Okay.
Can't do it.
I haven't checked out Dragon Ball Z at all, so I wouldn't know. I'm generally on the fence. For me, like Fairy Tail, I went back and forth to the point
really?
where like I could literally like follow the sub or the dub at any point. Like I literally listen to both all the time. And then there's some where like if I'm so used to the sub, when I transfer over to the dub, it just feels like culture shock.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. I kind of need to make the choice. Within the first 5 episodes, I sort of flip back and forth.
Yeah.
But if it's a long form show, and I think for me, the Dragon Ball Z thing is because I grew up with the dub, on
Yeah.
Toonami and things like that. And so for me to not hear those voice actors like Chris Sabat is like a shame to me. So, and which I'm sure many people feel about the subs as well.
I mean, I started watching Haikyuu in dub, and that was great. They have a pretty good dub cast as well. And for me, I watch dub mainly when I want to do multitasking, like if I'm gaming or something, or
doing dishes or whatever, cooking. Yeah,
like I don't want to be reading, and I just want to listen and kind of watch.
Yeah, that's what they call a pastime.
Yes, yes.
You're not engaged with it. Yeah.
So we talked about Edward and Elric and some of the government officials, but we haven't actually introduced kind of the biggest antagonists yet, which are the homunculus.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So we get introduced to a couple of them early on. We get introduced to lust, greed, envy. Actually, it was lust, envy, and gluttony.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Greed kind of came a little bit later. Greed's an interesting one. Out of all the 7, which one is your favorite?
Out of the 7, my favorite is probably gotta be Greed, just because of his character arc.
Yeah. Same.
Because he goes through 2 phases, right? So by the way, we're officially in spoiler territory.
Yep. Go for it.
He gets killed by his own father, and then tries to get absorbed, and then sort of separates into the second version where he takes over the guy from East Asia.
Yeah.
But he doesn't take him over, which is fascinating. He like partners with him.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like, thank you. And so they kind of become one person, and then they learn from each other, and he grows. And I think what Greed really showed us is that it's okay to be greedy in some ways, right? And that like being selfish doesn't make you a bad person. Being selfish means like maybe you need, and now I'm going to get into like self-care, right? But like if you're selfish to take care of yourself so that you can be there for other people, that's powerful, right? But that is seen as, a greedy thing.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because of all the people he could have bonded with, he bonded with Link, who in itself is actually a very fascinating character because he's a prince that wants to go, and I believe he wants to save his country, some kind of... It's been a while, but the way that he talks to Greed is very companion-like, where it's like, I'm going to use you, and then we're going to get through this.
Right. And it was kind of like a mutual understanding of, you need my power, I need your body. Like, let's do this, right? And so they kind of did it together. Now, if I were being honest, I think envy is probably my my true favorite, but mainly because I think envy is, again, this aspect of humanity that gets forgotten about till it rears its ugly head, right? Like this
Yeah.
concept. And I really liked that the art style and body design for envy was amorphous.
Yeah.
Right. So it wasn't, gender specific.
Even the
Even
voice acting was
Yeah.
very, very fluid.
Yeah. And so I really appreciated that, just both from like a representation in media, but also that is true. Like it is the true aspect of envy is, we all want what others have in some way, shape, or form. And I mean, honestly, has one of the best kills in the whole
Oh yeah.
the whole season, which is Hughes, which is like so sad.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you were
Which
gonna
we
be
should probably
talking
talk about that now,
Roy
but-
Mustang.
Oh yeah, no, has like the best kill and the best
Yeah,
death, like
yeah.
for sure.
Although
For sure.
Lust also had a really cool death.
That's true. That's true. And she's a badass.
Yeah.
Like the only homunculi that I'm like I didn't like was Gluttony.
For me, it was Sloth. Gluttony, I
Oh, yeah,
tolerated.
Yeah, no, you're right. Because Sloth like did nothing.
Yeah,
I mean,
which is
like
kind
was
of the
super
point, but-
strong. Yeah, I guess. But in terms of the show, like didn't really progress.
Yeah, he had no
anything.
character. He was just. So basically, what each of the homunculi represents one of the 7 deadly sins, which is a trait that I personally think overused in anime.
It's a trope at this point.
Yeah, it really is. But I think FMA pretty much what kind of founded the trope a little bit. It might have been beforehand, but they really brought it prominent. And yeah, each homunculi is one of the 7 deadly sins, and Sloth's job is to create tunnels underneath the kingdom to form this one giant transmutation circle, because you can't do alchemy without transmutation circles.
Right. Unless you're Ed.
Unless you're Ed. And that's
Which
because he
we'll
can
get
make
back to.
circles by clapping his hands. He also he talked to God.
Yeah. So, well, we'll get there. We'll get
Yeah.
back to it. But so Sloth does his tunneling thing. Lust sort of manipulates. Envy can transform, so it can turn into anyone else. Lust has like and like claws and shit.
Yeah.
Gluttony can eat anything. Greed can turn his skin to stone. Who
We
else?
have
Pride.
Wrath. Oh,
So
yeah.
Pride was a surprise. So Pride was another turning point
Yes.
for me, or like a plot twist where it's a freaking kid,
Yes.
So, like,
it's the Führer's
yeah.
son.
the Führer's son, who also is a
Yeah.
homunculi.
Yeah, the Führer himself. But that wasn't much of a shock. He
No,
like
no.
literally
Saw that
from
one
like in Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, episode 1, you're like, oh yeah, something's off with this dude. He just straight up killed a dude.
Yeah, you kind of get that vision. In the original, it takes a long time. Like you don't find out he is one until a lot longer. But and he's Wrath, and he has like all-seeing eye or whatever. But Pride is probably the scariest out of the 7.
And the oldest,
he's
I
got
believe, if I remember.
Yeah, he's the original sin. And then there's Father, who's the main antagonist over all those guys, who it's a long story, but is like a dwarf in a flask who then sort of takes over the form of
Hohenheim.
Ed and Hohenheim, who looks exactly like Ed and Alphonse's dad. There's like so many weird things.
Yeah,
and
the
timelines.
ending does get a little bit weird there.
Yeah,
Not gonna lie.
But I mean, they tied it up as weird as it was. But Father, the way he wanted to get closer to God was to separate himself from humanity, right? So take away all the things that make you human, and like your emotions. And so, again, that's sort of the main through line villains. But going back to why Ed can do alchemy by just clapping his hands together, which is somewhat weird, is that he has that connection to a quote unquote God in this universe. And his arm is still technically connected to that. And so like his body is connected to the universe's life force. So he's able to do a transmutation without a circle.
Yeah.
No one else can do that except for, I think, Father.
Yeah. And if you think the power is broken, it is, but he loses it at some point.
Yeah. And it's anime. So.
Yeah, it's anime. You gotta have a broken protagonist, otherwise he can't win.
That's right.
So we're kind of going in. We're learning some of the structures, and we were talking about episode 4 with Nina Tucker. Nina Tucker is basically a little girl that Edward and Alphonse was babysitting, looking after. They were, I think her father was the scientist that had a library, and they were trying to read up.
Yeah, they were there to see the Tucker.
Yeah,
they were there to see the guy.
Shao
Tucker, asshole extraordinaire. And like they were there to see him because he's a famous state alchemist, very well known for his work with chimeras, which is the fusing of animals. And yeah, so they were playing with Nina and the dog Alexander. And it's very, like, the start of the episode, like 10 minutes, is very lighthearted, right?
Very lighthearted.
Everything's cool. Like, you do find out that the husband's wife passed away, or, you know, Shao Tucker's wife had passed away, etc. And he goes through this feeling of, like, I will never achieve what I want to achieve with my life, which is he wanted to create a talking chimera.
Yeah.
So a chimera that can have conversation. And so you can probably surmise, if you haven't seen the show, again, if you've listened this far, we've ruined a lot of it for you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, do you want to describe what happens?
Basically, he came up with the brilliant idea of fusing his daughter and her dog into one being. And then Scar comes up. Well, first of all, Edward and Alphonse come back trying to find Nina, and they're like, where is she? And they see this kind of morphous where it's like the dog with Nina's hair, and she's just pleading with Edward, pleading with Edward. And he's just sitting there realizing that that's what Shao Tucker did. He fused the two together.
Yeah.
So the state troopers, or the state, came, arrested him, and then Scar comes in and kills Nina.
Yeah. As, like, offensive to you know, God. Like, life. Yeah, you know, and also to mercy, you know. Because it's quite painful.
That's the first time where we see Scar in a different light. Because before then, he was just kind of like a rumored killer, someone to be afraid of. And then we get the scene where he goes in and he just has pity. He just straight up feels bad for the thing. And so he saw it as a mercy killing, which is very fascinating.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked about Nina. Hugh's death. Let's talk about Hugh's death.
Yeah. Well,
because that happens.
You want to describe who Hughes is to begin with?
Yeah, that's probably more important. So Hughes is another state alchemist, best friend to Roy Mustang, who we talked about earlier, and is almost like the detective of the show, I guess, in a lot of ways. So like he's definitely sort of Sherlock Holmes vibe, but super funny,
goofy dad,
super goofy. They do a really good job of short character development with him. Yeah, because he dies in episode 10, I think. And so they sort of introduce him. He's digging into and finding out more and more about Father's plan, and essentially the homunculi get involved, and Envy ends up killing him. Now Envy ends up killing him, I believe, disguised as his wife.
Yes, and he couldn't kill his own wife. He couldn't.
Right.
He couldn't do it.
And so even though he knows that it's not his wife, he couldn't bring himself to shoot the image of his wife. And so, like, again, just such like a really powerful statement about love and who he is as a character. But he also is highly important because he does get the message through that, like,
in a very abstract way. to
Yeah.
Roy. But the reason being is he found out that the state is behind a lot of this.
Yeah.
Like
Hence the Fuhrer.
Yeah,
right?
the fear. He found out, and so he's like, I can't talk to Roy on any government phones. They're probably tapped. They're probably wired.
Yeah.
So he goes to a payphone to try and contact him, and Envy beats him to it.
Yeah. So no, I mean that was pretty gut wrenching, and again, sort of gave me Game of Thrones vibes, even though at the time I saw this, Game of Thrones wasn't a thing. Which is, they can kill any character at any time. Right?
Yeah,
and
that's something that I really like talking about. Great storytelling is you got to give the bad guys wins. You got to let them win sometimes, and those wins have to be impactful. Otherwise, you don't have anything on stake.
Right. And it also makes you hate them more, so that it's more satisfying when good prevails.
Yeah.
Right. So no, I thought that was a really well done turning point.
And what
we talked about.
What was really cool is that they didn't just let him die and then never brought him up again. They kept coming back to him. Those scenes in the future where they're going and doing flashbacks to the war, where they're, it's Roy and Maze, trying to take out Scar's village, and they're just talking about war, and you're sitting there and you're like, oh, I know what happens to you. It's so gut wrenching.
Yeah, and again, it makes you realize, right? Like, even though Hughes is like a really good dude the first time you meet him, you also realize he was a part of the murder and genocide of a people, right?
Yeah,
like
millions of innocent people, and that weighs on him.
Right. And again, another theme that this show shows is like people, number one, can grow, but two, that like there's two sides to everyone.
Yeah.
Right. Like there are good and bad in everyone's hearts. Right. Like so I really enjoyed that. And it just made it really human, like, and relatable, even in a very unrelatable world. Yeah. So those are some of the ones that I got. There's one that I was reading about that I forgot about when I was preparing for this.
Yeah.
You know how Roy Mustang has the, flame energy that like he can flick, and the reason he can do it is he's got a transmutation circle on his glove.
Yeah.
That transmutation circle comes from Hawkeye's father's research.
Yep. That he put on her back.
On her back.
Which, that scene when she strips, at first I was like, wait, what is she doing? And then she shows him, and I'm like, okay, A, fan service, but B, yeah.
I mean, and then it makes you really realize, because for a long time you feel like, oh, these two are like love interests. But in fact, it's more, and they sort of are, but it's more like a, mutual respect and like understanding, and like we've been through some shit together, right? Like, very, very much we were soldiers type thing. And when that got revealed, I was like, dang, that's wild.
Yeah, it really added some more to her character. I really like the female characters in this show. Maybe it was because it was written by a female manga writer, but
that had some pretty strong female characters, particularly some that come to mind, right, is like Ed and Al's teacher.
Yes. Izumi Curtis.
Izumi. She's just like a force of nature, right?
Yes.
And like really strong, really powerful. Her husband is a giant man, or her love interest, right?
He has a bromance with Alex Armstrong at one point.
Yeah. They do they do the Predator, arm lock, like it's so good. But but he's afraid of her, right? Like in a loving way, but because she's so strong. Winry may not be an alchemist, right? But is like Ed's rock emotionally.
Yeah. I mean, she even has that tough scene where she has the choice to shoot Scar because Scar killed her parents. And Ed talked her out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that was the moment where Scar was even up. He was just like, "Hey, shoot me! I did it! Shoot me! I deserve it!"
Right. Well, because that's the moment too where, you realize Scar knows exactly what he's doing, right? Like he knows he's part of this problem, right? But he can't stop himself. He's already lost, and that again makes him a relatable character. Yeah. So Winry, the mom. I mean, the woman who's she's like the
Olivia
general.
Armstrong.
Is that That's the one who's a general, right?
Yes, at the Winter Fort.
Yeah.
Alex's sister.
Yes.
That relationship as well. We haven't even really talked about Alex Armstrong. We did a little bit. He's the mom of the group, but his sister is like ironclad. Don't mess with at all. She reminds me a lot of Mario Leona from Black Clover.
Yeah. Very, very similar. I was gonna say Mary Jane from Fairy Tail, but that's not true.
No.
It's very different. Very different.
No,
character.
Mary Jane's too sweet.
Yeah, exactly. Unless you get her in the demon.
I was gonna say Urza. She's closer to Urza.
Urza is a better comparison. But yeah, no, again, like it's such a cool thing to see, both genders represented really powerfully. And even in the homunculus, right? Like Lust is one of the strongest of the 7.
Yeah.
In terms of character arc, and she clearly, right, uses her sexuality as a weapon in and of itself, right, to sort of take that power back, which is cool.
How her end goes is insane because Roy loses his gloves, and we said like he can't do his flame alchemy without his gloves. So instead, he makes he literally carves out transmutation circle on his wrist, and then uses a lighter. That scene was so powerful.
It was super powerful, and I think that scene is one too where Lust could have escaped and chose to fight to protect. I think one of the other.
I think it was Envy.
I think it was and that was the moment where you realize like they aren't just pure evil, like they were created in order to serve this person, but that doesn't make them inherently bad. It's back to the same reason why I think anti-heroes are so powerful and why we relate so much to villains like the Joker, or villains like those things, is they're not the villains in their story, they're the heroes. Right?
Yeah.
They're like, what don't you see? Like, why can't I explain this to you? And so it's, nobody's the villain in their own story. And so it's a good through line there as well. But yeah, no, some pretty badass scenes. And it's a shorter anime. It's certainly not like
it's like 60 episodes if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Yeah, all on Netflix, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was able to binge it at the time in like a couple weeks.
Yeah, I think I binged in like 3 days.
I could probably now, like, I binged ReZero in like 3 days. So,
dude, that blows my mind. I still have not seen that interview because I need to watch that show.
That's my most decisive episode. Divisive, I mean, with Sailor. Yeah, I've got like a 50% like ratio on YouTube with that. But it's also my most viewed podcast as well.
Well, there you go.
So
you got to have the haters. You got to have haters.
I'm going to
have haters, you're not doing it.
I literally titled it ReZero is overhyped. So you're good.
Probably a bunch of those people just came.
The thing is that I said at the end, like, I liked the show.
Yeah.
I just thought it was overhyped. Yeah. Sailor, not so much, but...
Sailor didn't like it?
She did not. She said she would have dropped it if she wasn't forced to do the podcast.
Well, good for her. I mean, how long is that?
That one is 50 episodes.
Oh my God.
Give or take. It's 2 seasons.
Okay.
And the second one drags a little bit. They don't play opening or ending credits. Like, it's just almost straight 30 minutes of pure anime.
Oh, wow.
They don't.
That's unique.
Yeah, it's very unique. I'm very appreciative of the style. It's just slow, and I think that they could have explained some things better. And the main character isn't that likable.
Well, that sucks because you see a lot of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, cool.
I definitely recommend it. At least taking a look at the first 5 episodes. If you're not hooked by the 5th episode, can't
stop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
all right. I'll have to check it out.
Back to Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. So we've talked a bit about all of the homunculus a little bit. At the end, we kind of get this giant battle where, you know, Sloth is building this giant transmutation circle. So Azubi and her husband, and then later Alex come and they take on Sloth, which was a fun battle in itself.
Yeah, and that was at the
fort.
At the fort. Yep.
Yeah, that was at the fort. And then at the same time, we also have the Wrath going around the Fuhrer, straight up killing people. It's like there's giant war that's actually at several different points. They even include some like outside forces that didn't quite make sense to me. They were just kind of there, if I remember correctly, but
yeah, clearly not that important. I don't remember either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But a lot of epic battles, and then we finally get, at the end, Edward versus Father. What do you think of that whole confrontation?
I enjoyed it. I mean, I enjoyed it as a fan of anime because it is about as shonen as you can get.
Yeah.
Where it's explosions and magic and shooting and fire and death and all sorts of stuff, right? Like it was almost like a Dragon Ball Z fight, in a lot of ways, but definitely more stylized. What I liked about it most was, as it progressed, it sort of reminded me, again, not to like draw too many parallels, but between the battle of Harry Potter and Voldemort, where like Father basically does succeed, right? Like does sacrifice a lot of people, opens up the gate to the heavens and becomes this god, right? In theory. And even then the group of people could still rally against him and defeat him, right? Where it was, you know, his own son, Greed, comes in and comes back and tries to absorb him, and by absorbing him it actually causes the father to lose in some ways, right? Like there's all these things that everything he's tried to reject is the thing that ends up being his downfall. That I really, really enjoyed that sort of sentiment at the end. So I thought they tied it together really well. And to me, they use imagery really powerful in this, where the ultimate good, which in this case is Ed, and the ultimate evil are almost carbon copies of each other, right? That they are physically almost the same at a certain point. And that they were born from the same blood, and they were, you know, we all come from the same place. Like they were kind of playing on, hinting on all that. And so, no, I really, really enjoyed it. And then, like I said, it's of course a lot of fire and brimstone, but
what I really found fascinating was that at the very end of the fight, Edward is just pounding the dude. He's got no more alchemy left or anything. It's almost just bloody and sad the way they portray it, where it's not like this, it's not a glorified fight like you would expect from like Dragon Ball or One Piece, for example. You know, you don't get this amazing finishing blow. It's almost sad and just painful that he has to do it.
Right. And then going past the fight as well, right? Because he does, you know, sort of lose himself, right? It's back to that vengeance. You lose yourself in the vengeance, and then once they do get to the end, and they see the gate again, right? So they've connected,
Mhm.
and the thing, not the thing, but what's the creature? It's not a creature. It's like the gatekeeper,
Yeah,
right?
I think it's just God itself, or it called itself. I think that's what.
It calls itself something. I think Ed maybe says that, and he's like, "Well, that's interesting." Like that
Yeah,
you would
yeah.
say that.
I think
Yeah,
that's it. It doesn't have a name. That's just what Ed
yeah.
calls it.
I'll call it the stranger for now.
Yeah.
But so he meets the stranger and he says, "Well, it's welcome back," because they had met,
Mm-hmm.
all those times before, all that time before, and obviously they say, "Well, I want Al's body back. Don't worry about my arms and leg and stuff. Like I just want Al. Like what do I have to give up?" And I think at that point, their dad says, "I'll sacrifice my life. I want to give up my life so that we can get Al's body back." And instead, Ed's like, "No, there's got to be a way."
Mm-hmm.
And then he says, "Well, you can give up your connection to this place." And then that would be enough. So
Yeah.
I think you hinted at it earlier, right? He gives up his super godlike power in order to save his brother,
Yeah.
which is all he's ever wanted to do.
Yeah.
So,
He pretty
yeah.
much gives up alchemy, which is
Yeah.
very fascinating, and I like that whole idea.
Yeah.
And
And then
go
Al's
ahead.
body is older, which is weird. I
Yeah.
was like, okay, so it aged, I guess, without eating. or
Yeah,
anything.
yeah. We didn't even really talk about the fact that Alphonse, I think at one point, found his body and then decided to go on without it, didn't he? Because they got separated. Edward and Alphonse
Yeah.
got separated somewhere towards the third act of the show.
Yeah. I think you might be right, because what he was saying is like, I can't help him
Yeah.
if I do this at this point. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, no, again, very powerful. So overall, I don't know if you do this at the end of your podcast episodes. What would you give Full Metal Alchemist out of a 10?
I'd give it a solid 9.
Okay.
I'd give it a
Okay,
9.
nice.
I
That's
I
respectable.
don't really think 10 out of 10, because I think there might have been. It's also been a while since I've seen it, so I can't
Yeah.
straight up give it a 10. But I think there was a couple points here and there that I think they could have touched up or got rid of. I didn't care too much
Yeah.
about the chimeras towards the end. Like they
Yeah.
introduced a couple chimera dudes, and I'm like, why?
Yeah. There's definitely pacing issues too. Like, again, you don't need. I don't think they needed the amount of episodes that they had. And I wish they kind of would have explored more of the other countries
I
a little
agree.
bit
I
in that space.
I
but-
think I would have been a lot happier too if they expanded on like the political ramifications. Like one
Yeah,
of my favorite
right, like,
anime
what's
of
the
all
point?
time is Magi. I don't know if you've ever seen that one, but it's got
Yeah, I do like it, and that one's weird because you got to like follow 4 different animes, because there's like one that's in the past, one that's in the future, one that's like present. But
Yeah.
no, I like that one a lot.
Yeah, yeah. But and that one has like a whole like world of different political factions that are butting heads against each other, and I like that personally.
I like the lore in Magi or Magi, depending on what you
Yeah.
believe it's called, and like Sinbad, and
Yeah.
that whole aspect is pretty cool. So
Yeah, I've read that entire manga. I'm a huge fan.
yeah, I would say for me, Full Metal. I mean, I have to give it a 10 out of 10
Mhm.
because I've stated publicly that it's one of my favorite animes of all time. I do love it very, very much.
Mhm.
But I can see that it has its flaws. I just choose to not care.
No, that's perfectly fine. I'm literally
Yeah.
like that
Yeah.
with Fairy Tail. I acknowledge Fairy
yeah.
Tail has no plot. I don't care.
It's got plot. It's just a lot of plot
Yeah.
and a lot of different plots.
A lot of
But-
plot armor.
Yeah, exactly. That's got some political through lines too, Fairy Tale.
hmm Well, is there anything else you want to talk about? Anything you want to bring up? I mean, we're in complete spoiler territory, so if like
Yeah. I mean, we've just shared the whole
Ending.
show.
I
Yeah,
will
so,
say
I
the
mean-
very, very like epilogue I was not happy with. And that was with Edward leaving Winry to go on an adventure. And I was like,
Yeah, that was weird.
why?
Yeah, unnecessary. Because they could have just done the happy ending, and been done with it, right?
Yeah.
But there is a movie-ish thing where it does take place like in the past, but in the future, where it's like that steampunk. They've got zeppelins and all sorts of stuff. So that might have been why. But yeah, I thought the end was good until that. So I kind of blanked that out. There's nothing else that I would really say other than, thanks for hanging out with us if you stuck to the end.
Yeah. Do you want to plug your stuff one more time?
Sure, yeah. Rhyce Records, RHYCE, and then Records, just like it sounds. And that is my main channel. I've got a reaction channel that I don't do a ton with, unfortunately, called Rhyce Records Returns, but we'll try to get more on there. And then, I've got a cover of Divide's Move Mountains coming out this Friday.
Oh, I'm excited.
Yeah, and so I'm super stoked. I have Hypo mixing it right now, Hypotoria, but he is currently sick, so I may mix it myself, which is fine. And just so I can make sure it gets out. And then I have one following, so 2 weeks following that is an original song. So it'll be my first non-anime related track I've ever written and recorded.
Nice. So, I look forward to taking a listen to that.
Yeah, it should be good. I'm pretty proud of the mix on that one. So
cool. All right. And so, with all that being said, I'm the Anime Overanalyst, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.
Take care.
Talking nerdcore today. We're talking nerdcore.